So what we have seen is that there has been the presence of Spanish law enforcement officials on the soil of Gibraltar at Eastern Beach. That is a grave violation of British sovereignty. We would consider it a grave violation of British sovereignty if they come into British Gibraltar territorial waters, let alone if they come onto the soil of Gibraltar. Additionally, there is an issue still to be determined as to whether or not weapons were discharged in Gibraltar. We've all seen many videos that show or appear to show certain things. Of course, the government has to act on the basis of certified advice to the government as to what has happened, and we are therefore waiting for that confirmation from ballistics experts, etc. But the government is unable to act directly. The government acts with the United Kingdom on this, and robust diplomatic response will follow. But we need to have all of that information entirely properly certified to us, confirmed, so that we can then calibrate with the United Kingdom what the appropriate level of robust diplomatic response will be.
You say it appears the Spanish law enforcement agencies did not give advance notice to their Gibraltarian counterparts of the chase. How would this have changed the situation?
Well, of course, we have said on many occasions that if Spanish law enforcement agents are involved in a chase, which they believe is going to bring them into British Gibraltar territorial waters, they need to advise local law enforcement, so local law enforcement can be present and assist in that chase. We would then permit them to enter British Gibraltar territorial waters to continue a chase. If any apprehension has to be done within British Gibraltar territorial waters, that would be a matter for Gibraltar's law enforcement agencies.
Are you concerned this will have an impact on treaty negotiations?
We have to understand that the sort of thing that we're seeing here is the sort of thing that we never want to see again. Treaty negotiations will enable us to recast much of what is giving rise to this sort of activity in a way that means we will not see it again. So I think it would be extraordinarily short-sighted to allow something like this impetuous action taken in the heat of the moment by those who are not involved in treaty negotiations to derail treaty negotiations.
Well, as you say, the video clearly appears to show shots fired on the shore close to a residential area by Spanish authorities. Short of fatal injuries, this could hardly be more serious.
I don't think I have seen with my own eyes anything quite as reckless as what I have seen already in the videos that have circulated, and I think most people in Gibraltar have seen. But I'm not speaking to you just as Fabian Picardo, another Gibraltarian who is as incensed by what he's seen as every other Gibraltarian will be. I'm speaking to you as the Chief Minister of Gibraltar. In order to take action diplomatically through the United Kingdom, we need to certify what we have seen and have it confirmed by the RGP and Customs and other ballistics experts. We have initial information. Of course, these things now have to be properly certified. But to discharge a weapon in an area which has residential blocks of that sort into the air, that is to say, in the angle where people are in their homes sleeping with their children, I cannot imagine anything more reckless or negligent.
Well, aside from the jurisdictional elements, these were two law enforcement officers, albeit Spanish, facing a group of smugglers on their own. Could these have been warning shots?
They could have been, and warning shots issued into the air in those circumstances. We need to understand what happened. Did they mean to come onto the shore into Gibraltar, or did the weather bring them into the shore into Gibraltar? Did they know that they were in Gibraltar? We had a very recent case where Gibraltar police officers who were off Spanish waters believed they were in British Gibraltar territorial waters. So if it was good for us to believe that our RGP officers did not know that they were off Spain, off La Donada Beach, it must equally be good, if that is the reasoning advanced, that Spanish officers did not know that they were off Gibraltar Beach, and perhaps by the time they realized that, they were being brought ashore by the storm. All of those things are to be determined. That's why we have to be in contact with our Spanish counterparts and get their views and explanations as to what happened. But of course, they are two law enforcement officials who believe they were doing a job. I've been in touch with my counterparts to express my concern about their well-being and ask after them, although they should not have been in Gibraltar, and I think that they acted recklessly from what I have seen. I'm of course concerned about their well-being.
Spanish press reports claim the Gibraltar law enforcement officers did not offer full assistance to the Spanish officers. Can you comment on this?
Well, I mean, I'm long in the tooth enough to know that I shouldn't believe anything that I read in the Spanish press. Of course, our law enforcement officials offered their assistance to their Spanish law enforcement colleagues. Of course, they offered them medical assistance, and the Spanish SVA officer said that they wanted to leave immediately, and they were permitted for the purposes of de-escalation to leave immediately. Our law enforcement officials were also outnumbered by what I can only call, from what I have seen in those videos, a mob of about 25 as I understand it, Spanish individuals on the beach in Gibraltar.
Now, aside from the diplomatic side, the incident itself is concerning, with some residents of the area telling GPC they're scared to go to the beach and that smuggling activity is a common occurrence. Is the government satisfied with the level of law enforcement on Gibraltar's coasts and sea with regards to smuggling, and will efforts be stepped up given, as you say, for example, the incident that they were faced with last night?
As you know, every time that we have been faced with evidence of smuggling, we have acted. We've acted to designate areas of Gibraltar to give additional powers to law enforcement officials in Gibraltar. So we'll take advice from the RGP and from Customs to see whether they believe that they need additional powers in that area. I should tell you that what appears to have happened last night is that there was the displacement of smuggling activities from Spain's own shores. There was an operation in Spain which appears to have displaced this gang to Gibraltar, and that they were coming to Gibraltar to receive tobacco that could not be landed on Spain's own shores. So this appears to be a wholly Spanish operation which then manifests itself on our shores.
And what would you say to the comments made by residents of the area? As I've said, that this is not an uncommon occurrence, not obviously the shots and the level of incident, but definitely smuggling activity.
Exactly as I've told you, that this is something on which I will take advice from Customs and from the RGP, and if they tell us that they need additional powers to deal with any problem which is recurring, they will have them, just as they had them in Laguna Estate, in Glasses Estate, then in all other estates, then in other areas which we have designated special zones. Eastern Beach is not a special zone, and in the area around the frontier where we displaced completely the sort of madrugada smuggling activity that there was when I was elected, and we've got rid of it by giving our law enforcement agents additional powers to deal with those issues in that area.
You say you've received a fuller report now from the RGP and Customs. Can you tell us a bit more about the timeline? Which of those agencies was the first to arrive and how long did it take them?
So my understanding is that the first agency to arrive was HM Customs. They were there pretty quickly after the beaching of the Spanish vessel, and subsequently about 8 to 10 minutes later the RGP arrived with an armed response vehicle.
Are you satisfied with this response time?
Well, of course I'm satisfied with the response time. I think that the work of the Gibraltar law enforcement officials was absolutely exemplary, and that they must be thanked for the work that they do, and we must entirely back the actions that they took.
Was there a presence at sea from the authorities during the incident, given the chase initiated obviously at sea?
As I understand it, last night conditions were not propitious for being at sea. For that reason, we did not have any at-sea involvement in respect of this particular chase on the side, neither were we alerted to it. And as I'm telling you, I believe that this was a Spanish operation of displacement in Spain, which moved a tobacco smuggling operation towards Gibraltar and towards Eastern Beach.
Are you concerned that there have been no arrests when the smugglers clearly had what appeared to be tobacco boxes with them and were on land when the local police seem to have arrived, according to the video that's been circulating?
So what I have seen does not give me a full scale of the activity of what was going on, but I've told you that the information that I have suggests that the law enforcement officials from Gibraltar who arrived at the scene were outnumbered by the number of those who were present on the beach, all of whom appear to have been Spanish, all of whom appear to have been involved in a Spanish smuggling operation which was going on in La Linea and was displaced to Gibraltar. It appears that they made a decision, and this is very much speculation from what we have seen in the early information that we have, that they made a decision to come to Gibraltar to land tobacco. They couldn't land there, and those who were on land came to Gibraltar to try and collect that tobacco from Gibraltar. This was not an operation around Gibraltar, although it happened as in the end to be something which manifests itself on our shores.
But given that obviously it culminated in Gibraltar and they were on Gibraltarian soil when the local police, when the Gibraltar police arrived, are you concerned at the lack of arrests?
No, I'm not concerned about the lack of arrest, because the first thing that the police need to do is to assess the situation and determine what was happening. They had reports of shots being fired. They had to determine whether somebody was armed. They had to determine what action they needed to take. As I understand it, these people quickly made themselves scarce, but they were outnumbering those who were present, which were law enforcement officials at the time. I think the first duty of law enforcement officials is to determine the safety and security of everyone, then to determine whether offences have been committed, and then to determine whether they can safely arrest individuals who may have been involved in respect of those offences. I am confident that they made the right decisions in that moment, both Customs law enforcement agents and Royal Gibraltar Police law enforcement agents, and that they were able to assist their Spanish law enforcement counterparts in the way that they considered appropriate and dealt with the issue in the way that they could at that time. We're talking about 5 o'clock in the morning. This is not Main Street in the middle of the afternoon. This is 5 o'clock in the morning.
There are beach cameras. If the technology is there, why are these cameras switched off at night, and will this now be reviewed?
Well, as you know, and I think the GBC carried the story, we're required to switch the cameras off at night because of data protection issues, and therefore we are complying with the regulatory obligations that are imposed on us.
Is there any option available to review this?
Well, there may be, but this is not an issue that has been raised with the government of Gibraltar by any of the law enforcement agencies. Nobody is telling us that one of the ways that we could displace tobacco is simply by the placing or the use of cameras overnight. That is not an issue. There is a very powerful camera there from the MOD, which operates at night, which is a security camera. But the beach cameras are there for a purpose. They're there to achieve a purpose which is subject to regulatory control, and therefore this is not an issue that has been raised with us as being relevant in the context of the fight against illicit smuggling.
And finally, are you concerned that Gibraltar could be seen as a safe haven for tobacco smuggling?
There is no question of Gibraltar being seen as a safe haven for tobacco smuggling. Gibraltar has been putting up the price of tobacco consistently since I've been elected. We still nonetheless have some isolated incidents of this issue. They are dealt with expeditiously by the government of Gibraltar and by its law enforcement agencies when those issues arrive. You've seen how law enforcement has dealt with tobacco smuggling over the years, especially in the time that I've been elected Chief Minister. I think it's intolerable that there should be such an illicit trade. We see, in fact, that most of the people who were there last night, indeed all of the reports that we have suggest that all of the people there last night were Spanish and dealing with a Spanish smuggling operation on the Spanish side of the frontier, which ended up in Gibraltar as a place to avoid or try to avoid the operation that was ongoing there at the time.